I'm writing this from a motel room that smells like stale cigarettes and cheap bleach. My hands are shaking so violently that I've had to restart this paragraph 3 times. If you had told me a week ago that my life was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie, I would have laughed in your face. I thought I was the protagonist of a success story. 7 years with the woman of my dreams, 4 years of marriage, and a promotion on the horizon. Her name is Alina, or at least, that's the name of the woman I thought I knew. Now, I realize I've been sleeping next to a stranger for a very long time. They say betrayal doesn't start with a scream, it starts with a whisper. For us, it started with a screen. About 3 months ago, the open phone policy we'd had since our 3rd date suddenly evaporated. We used to be that couple, the ones who shared chargers and never thought twice about a notification. Then, Alina changed her passcode. It wasn't a simple PIN anymore. It was a complex sequence she shielded with her hand, like a state secret. When I jokingly asked if she was moonlighting for the CIA, she didn't laugh. She snapped. "I'm an adult, Mark. I deserve a digital boundary. Why are you acting like a paranoid warden?" The sheer venom in her voice left me speechless. I felt like the villain for simply noticing the weather had changed. Then came the overtime. Alina works in the municipal archives, a place where history moves slowly. Suddenly, there were emergency audits. She'd come home at 9 p.m., smelling not of old paper, but of a heavy, expensive rose perfume I'd never bought her. She'd walk straight to the shower, the water running for 40 minutes, while I sat in the kitchen with a plate of cold pasta, listening to the muffled hum of the pipes. I told myself I was being unsupportive. I told myself she was just stressed. I was a good husband. And God, looking back, that was just another word for perfect victim. The first real crack in the porcelain happened a month ago at the mall. We were grabbing coffee when a man in a charcoal wool coat stopped dead. He looked at Alina, and a sickeningly familiar smirk spread across his face. "Well, look who finally came out to play," he said. His voice had an intimacy that made the hair on my neck stand up. Alina turned a shade of white I didn't know human skin could achieve. She didn't introduce me. She didn't even say his name. She grabbed my arm with a grip that left bruises and dragged me toward the exit, muttering about a creepy ex-client. But I saw his eyes. He wasn't a stalker. He was a man who knew exactly how she tasted. I spent the next 2 weeks in a fog of gaslighting. Every time I pointed out an inconsistency, like why her car's GPS showed she'd been in the Heights when she said she was downtown, she turned it back on me. "Your anxiety is ruining this marriage, Mark. If you don't trust me, what do we even have?" It's a masterful tactic, making the person who is being lied to feel like the liar. The collapse happened last Thursday. Alina packed a bag for a leadership retreat 3 hours away. She kissed me, a dry, mechanical peck, and told me she'd call when she landed. An hour later, her office called our home landline. A clerk was looking for a specific ledger. When I mentioned the retreat, there was a long, suffocating silence. "Mark, there is no retreat." Alina took a leave of absence starting Monday. She said there was a crisis with your brother. My heart didn't just break. It felt like it was being put through a shredder. My brother, David. We hadn't spoken in 2 years after a falling out over our father's estate. The idea of them being in contact was a physical blow. I didn't call her. I went into our guest room, found her old MacBook, and plugged it in. I spent hours guessing passwords until I tried the date of my brother's wedding, the one I was uninvited to. Click. I was in. I opened the synced messages, and the world stopped spinning. There were thousands of texts, photos that I will never be able to unsee, videos of them in our bed while I was away on business trips, But it wasn't just sex. It was a conspiracy. David was deep in debt, and Alina had been funneling money from our joint savings into a private account he controlled. They were waiting for my year-end bonus to hit, a massive sum, before disappearing together. David's last message read, "Just a few more weeks of playing house with that loser, babe, then we're free." I sat there in the dark, the blue light reflecting off the tears I didn't even know I was crying. I realized I wasn't just a husband, I was an ATM. But as the sun began to rise, the grief hardened into a cold, obsidian rage. They wanted to hit me like a truck? Fine. I moved into this motel. I have 48 hours before she returns. 48 hours to ensure that when they finally try to leave, they have absolutely nothing. The good husband is dead. I didn't sleep that first night at the motel. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the timestamps on those messages. While I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for the kitchen remodel she dreamed of, she was sending him photos of the progress, joking about how much David would enjoy cooking in it once I was gone. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was financial, emotional, and psychological. They hadn't just stolen my wife and my brother. They were trying to steal my entire future. But as I watched the sun crawl over the horizon from my motel window, the shock evaporated, leaving behind a version of myself I didn't know existed. Cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless. My first move was to secure the perimeter. I knew if I moved too fast, they'd spook and drain the rest of the accounts before I could blink. I called a high-stakes divorce attorney, a man named Elias, who had a reputation for leaving the opposing side with nothing but their socks. I told him everything. When I mentioned the liquidating assets part of their messages, his voice dropped an octave. "Mark," he said, "this isn't just a divorce anymore. This is a fraud case. We need to move silently." Following Elias's advice, I didn't freeze our joint account immediately. Instead, I did something much more subtle. I opened a new private account at a different bank. Then, I contacted my company's payroll department. My year-end bonus, the $45,000 exit ticket they were waiting for, was scheduled to hit in 4 days. I rerouted that payment to my new private account. To Alina and David, the balance would look stagnant, but the big fish they were waiting for would never land in their net. But I needed more. I needed to see it for myself. I hired a private investigator, a former cop who specialized in discreet matrimonial surveillance. I gave him the address of the retreat city Alina was supposed to be in. He called me 6 hours later. "She's not in a hotel, Mark. She's at a lake house. And she's not alone. Your brother's truck is parked in the driveway. Do you want photos?" I told him I wanted everything. High-resolution shots, timestamps, and if possible, audio. I wanted a mountain of evidence so high they could never climb out of it. While the PI was doing the heavy lifting, I went back to our apartment one last time. Walking through those rooms felt like walking through a graveyard. I looked at the wedding photos on the mantel and felt a wave of nausea. I spent the afternoon doing a deep clean, which was actually a search for the private ledger the office clerk had mentioned. I found it hidden behind the false back of our bathroom vanity. It wasn't just a ledger, it was a diary of theft. Alina had been documenting every cent she funneled to David over the last 18 months. It was a meticulously kept record of my own exploitation. She had even noted down the best times to ask me for extra money for emergencies that never existed. She knew my triggers, my desire to be a provider, my fear of being like our neglectful father, and she used them against me like a weapon. Reading her notes on how easy I was to manipulate hurt more than the photos of them together. It was a roadmap of how she had dismantled my soul. The most chilling discovery, however, was a folder on a thumb drive taped to the inside of the ledger. It contained copies of my signatures. She had been practicing forging my name on loan applications. They weren't just planning to take the savings. They were planning to leave me with a mountain of debt in my name that I would be paying off for the rest of my life. They wanted me destitute, broken, and perhaps even in legal trouble. I took the ledger and the thumb drive and brought them straight to Elias. He looked through the documents, his face a mask of professional disgust. "This changes things," he said. "They're not just looking for a payout. They're looking to destroy you. But they've made a fatal mistake. By keeping these records, she's handed us the keys to their prison cells." He told me to go back to the motel and wait. "Alina will come home tomorrow night, expecting to play the tired traveler role. You need to be the happy husband for exactly 24 hours more." Can you do that, Mark? Can you look her in the eye and smile while knowing she's trying to ruin you? I looked at the photos the P I had just texted me, my wife and my brother, laughing on a deck with wine glasses in their hands, celebrating their freedom. I felt a cold, sharp smile spread across my face. "Elias," I said, "I've been a good husband for 7 years. I can be a great actor for one more day." The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the traveler to return. The next 24 hours felt like walking through a minefield in slow motion. I checked out of the motel at dawn, scrubbed the scent of cheap bleach off my skin, and returned to the apartment. I had to make it look like I'd never left. I fluffed the pillows, put a fresh bag in the trash, and even bought a bouquet of her favorite lilies. My skin crawled as I trimmed the stems. Every time I looked at the front door, I saw the image from the PI's camera, Alina and David, laughing, toasted to my destruction. She texted me at 4 p.m. "Just leaving the conference, so exhausted, can't wait to see my favorite guy. Love you, XOXO." The XOXO felt like a physical sting. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. For a split second, I wanted to scream, to call her a parasite, to tell her I knew about the lake house and the forged signatures. But I remembered Elias's voice. "Let them think they're winning until the very second the trap closes." I typed back, "Can't wait, babe. I'm making your favorite risotto. Drive safe." When the key finally turned in the lock at 7:30 p.m., my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Alina walked in, trailing a suitcase and a cloud of that expensive rose perfume. She looked radiant, that post-betrayal glow that I had mistaken for professional success. She dropped her bags and threw her arms around my neck. I forced myself not to recoil. I held her, smelling the faint scent of wood smoke on her hair, the lake house, and felt a cold, predatory calm settle over me. "How was the retreat?" I asked, my voice steady, eyes fixed on the lilies. "Oh, Mark, so tedious," she sighed, leaning back and giving me a weary smile. "Just endless workshops and networking. My brain is fried. But I think it'll lead to a big promotion next quarter." I nodded, playing my part. "That's amazing. You deserve it after all the hard work you've put in lately." We sat down to dinner. Across the table, she looked like the woman I'd loved for 7 years. She told me stories about colleagues who didn't exist and lectures she never attended. It was a masterpiece of fiction. But then, I decided to test the waters. I took a slow sip of wine and looked her straight in the eye. "By the way," I said casually, "I heard from David today." The fork in her hand didn't drop, but her knuckles went white. Her eyes darted to the side for a fraction of a second, a classic tell of a liar. "David? Your brother David? I thought you guys haven't spoken in years." "We haven't," I lied, leaning forward. "But he sent a weirdly cryptic email to my old work account. Something about settling old debts and moving on. I wondered if he'd reached out to you, since you used to be so close with his wife." Alina took a long drink of water, her throat working hard as she swallowed. No. Nothing. That's strange. Maybe he's just hitting another downward spiral. You know how he is with money. Yeah, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I know exactly how he is with money. The rest of the evening was a blur of calculated moves. While she was in the shower, again for 40 minutes, I did a quick sweep of her suitcase. In a hidden side pocket, I found a receipt for a jewelry store in the lake house town. A men's watch, gold, engraved with the initials, DS, David's initials. She hadn't even waited to spend my money. But the real smoking gun came when her phone lit up on the nightstand. She'd forgotten to take it into the bathroom. A message from David flashed on the lock screen. Is the loser asleep yet? I miss you already. Can't wait for Monday's bonus to hit. We're almost there. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't need to. I took a photo of the screen with my own phone and sent it straight to Elias and the PI. Monday was 48 hours away. That was the day my bonus was supposed to hit the joint account. That was also the day they planned to disappear. Alina came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, looking innocent and soft. You okay, Mark? You look a little distracted. Just thinking about the future, Alina, I said, smiling at her. I have a big surprise for you on Monday. Something that's going to change our lives forever. She beamed at me, her eyes crinkling with what looked like genuine affection. I love surprises, she whispered. I bet you do, I thought. But you're going to hate this one. I lay in bed next to her that night, staring at the ceiling, counting the minutes. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a hunter. And the prey was sleeping right next to me, dreaming of a life she'd stolen from my pockets. Monday was coming. And on Monday, the dead weight was going to show them exactly how heavy it could be. Monday morning. This was the day they'd circled on their calendars like a predatory holiday. I watched Alina across the kitchen island as she sipped her coffee, her eyes darting to her phone every 30 seconds. She was waiting for the notification, the $45,000 exit ticket that would signal the start of her new life with my brother. I have to run some errands before work, babe, she said, her voice trilling with forced energy. Huge project at the archives. Might be late tonight. Of course, I said, leaning against the counter. But remember, I have that surprise for you. Meet me at the bistro downtown at 6 p.m. I've booked a private room. Her eyes lit up with greed. She probably thought I was handing over the keys to a new house. I'll be there. I love you, Mark. I know you do, I whispered as the door clicked shut. The second her car pulled out, I went to work. I didn't go to the office. I met my lawyer, Elias. By noon, thanks to the evidence of fraud and forged signatures, a judge had granted a temporary freeze on all her assets and a restraining order. She was effectively penniless before lunch. The real show started at 6 p.m. I arrived early. I hadn't just invited Alina. I'd sent a reconciliation invite to my brother David, telling him I wanted to hand over a portion of our father's inheritance. I knew his greed would outweigh his caution. David was the first to arrive, wearing the gold watch Alina had bought with my money. He sat there smirking, probably texting her that the idiot was falling for it. 5 minutes later, Alina walked in. The look of pure terror on her face when she saw David sitting there was worth every cent I'd spent on the private investigator. Mark, what is David doing here? She stammered, her face turning a ghostly gray. Sit down, Alina, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. We're all family. Let's discuss the lake house. Or the $120,000 you funneled to David. Or maybe the forged signatures on those loan applications. David tried to stand, his face flushing deep red. Look, Mark, I don't know what. Sit down, David, a new voice interrupted. Elias walked in with the private investigator, and dropped a thick stack of folders on the table. My name is Elias Thorne. In these folders are photos of your retreat, transcripts of your plans to defraud my client, and a criminal complaint for identity theft. The silence was deafening. Alina started to sob, not out of regret, but out of the realization that she'd lost. David looked at his phone, his thumb frantically tapping. "Are you looking for the bonus, David?" I asked, sliding my phone across the table. It showed the balance of my new private account. "It's not in the joint account, and neither is anything else. Your cards? Cancelled. The lease on your new apartment? Contacted about the fraud." "Mark, please," Alina wailed, reaching for my hand. "It was a mistake. He manipulated me." I pulled away. "You didn't love me when you were laughing about liquidating the dead weight in our own bed, Alina. You didn't love me when you were signing my name to debts that would have ruined me." I stood up. "The police are waiting outside for a statement. Don't bother coming back to the apartment. The locks were changed 2 hours ago. Your clothes are in trash bags at the motel." I walked out without looking back. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I was carrying. 6 months later, the divorce is final. Alina got nothing and is paying restitution for the fraud. David has disappeared. Hiding from the debt collectors he can no longer pay off with my sweat. People ask if I'm bitter. No. I lost a wife and a brother, but I found myself. I'm sitting in my new apartment looking at the sunset, and the silence feels like peace. The dead weight finally cut the rope, and God, it feels good to fly.